let me ask you a question, Mike. The Cowboys had an opportunity after they traded for him to sign him to a long-term deal. Would you have done that at that point after the trade?
When, though? When? After the Raiders game? When Jerry was going on and on about how he'd never seen anything like it? It was so over the top. If I'm CeeDee Lamb, I'm thinking, damn, he's never said that about me. So that's the problem of getting caught up in the moment, doing 105.3 The Fan in Dallas twice a week, and you say all these great things. David Mulugeta, who also represents Micah Parsons and has been down this road with Jerry before, you file that away. If the owner is going to say that kind of thing publicly about your client, yeah, okay, let's go. But the market is still 40, and that was before the cap went up another $10, $15 million. That's the thing. Fans get caught up in the numbers as it relates to what the players are making, and they compare it to what they make, and they get resentful.
Yeah.
$28 million. Oh, my God. Oh, I hope you can feed your family at $28 million. And I understand why people do that, because we know what the players make. But the reason they make what they make is because of the salary cap, which is funded by half of the money that is coming through the cash register, and the other half is going straight into the pockets of the owners who are floating around on 200-foot super yachts, and nobody ever says boo about that. That's what drives me crazy, and that's what I think the Cowboys are trying to do. They're trying to push George Pickens into this spot where he's going to feel like he has no choice but to say yes to $28 million for another year, even though he should have a market-level deal.
Well, and he probably should, right? I don't think that there's any dispute about how good and how talented George Pickens is. It's just a matter of the consistency, right? Is he going to be able to be on the field each week, performing at the high level that we have come to expect from him? But I think, as you're saying, Mike, it reminds me of Tua Tagovailoa when he said the market is the market, right? You know, this is not something that he determined. It's not something that George Pickens determines. But if you are a great wide receiver and you're going to want a salary that is commensurate with the top other flight receivers. And what's interesting always about the Cowboys is they don't get ahead of these things, right? They franchise tag. They do what they feel like they should do. And then eventually it feels like, at least in the case with Dak Prescott, they get held over a barrel, right? I mean, you could say in some ways the same thing about Micah Parsons, not doing a deal earlier. And then you get to the point last year where you're saying, okay, we'll trade him and then we'll get these picks. And then our defense obviously is not going to be better without Micah Parsons, but that is what it is. So I don't necessarily know where they're going to go with it, but certainly the market is the market. George Pickens has put up numbers that make you say to yourself, okay, he deserves something that is relatively, in line with everybody else that is making a certain amount of money at the receiver position.
Well, that was my point to you. They could have signed him right after they traded him a year ago in the offseason before he played for them. They could have.
That would have been the time to do it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like the Browns did with Jerry Jeudy.
So now you have CeeDee Lamb, who's making $34 million a year, who is your number one receiver, whether he is or isn't. We can argue that. But you can't pay him more than CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's going to say, I deserve more. So they're in a spot here. They're in a pickle, really. They want to keep him, but how are they going to keep him? What if he doesn't play on the franchise tag? You can give him more than the franchise tag, and that may be where it comes in, that they get to July 15th, whatever the date is, and they say, we'll give you more to come into training camp.
Well, and that's the thing. After July 15, the only thing you can't do is sign the player to a multi-year contract. You can still give him more money than what the franchise tender calls for. No one's ever done that. There have been terms added. I think with Lance Briggs or Albert Haynesworth, there were terms that if you do certain things, we won't tag you again.
What did they do with Josh Jacobs a couple years ago with the Raiders?
They did do something where they sprinkled a little bit more, whether it was incentives. They did something to get him to show up.
Yeah.
You're right. Good memory there. Bad memory. Bad job by me.
Well, I'm a little younger.
Now, there was at one point. See, I'm not the oldest one on the desk, so it doesn't bother me today. I'll assume any age-related comments aren't directed at me. So when Pickens first started to emerge last year, I said at one point, they may have to decide between CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens at some point. You may not be able to afford both guys. When you have contract that is market level for Dak Prescott. At some point, you're spread too thin. At some point, remember, hey, they had Amari Cooper when they drafted CeeDee Lamb.
Right.
And they had given up a first-round pick just a couple of years earlier for Amari Cooper. Remember how what'd you do during the first round of the draft? We watched film of Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
But they got him late in his rookie deal. And they had to pay him a bunch of money. They had his fifth-year option. They signed him to $20 million a year contract, which was market value at the time. And they eventually move on from Amari Cooper because CeeDee Lamb's the future. And you just wonder, between CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, do they think they have to make a choice? And I know you made the comment that CeeDee Lamb's a better receiver, but I know Sims has said that he saw by the end of the year that defenses were more deferential to Pickens than Lamb and more concerned about Pickens than Lamb.
Lamb was banged up, too. You have to take that into consideration. The last 2 years he's been banged up, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, if he's healthy, I think he's the better receiver. But it's debatable. They're both very good receivers. They're both top-flight receivers. They've both been first or second team All-Pro. They're up there, you know. And you talk about the Bengals had the same thing with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And they kept both of them, found a way to do it. Now, I think that both of those players are better than T. Higgins. Both the Cowboys receivers are better than T. Higgins. But they found a way to do it. But look what their defense did. I mean, so they're sort of in the same boat as what the Bengals went through with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. Just the Bengals, right? And their team structure and how everything revolves around Joe Burrow. And it is sort of the same, you know, with Dak Prescott. That's the way it should be with the franchise quarterback. But at a certain point, it becomes, all right, what are you doing with your defense? Like, can you actually field a competitive defense that helps you stay in games so that your offense can then go put things away? I mean, obviously it didn't happen with either the Bengals or the Cowboys last year. I mean, you got Logan Wilson going from one to the other, and, you know, he's still the same linebacker, and the defenses are both still bad. So it's one of those situations where I don't think you really want to be the Bengals, where people are saying, hey, what are you going to do to make sure you're maximizing Joe Burrow's prime? I mean, A, they got to keep Burrow healthy, but B, it's can you field a defense that's competitive? Right? Can you field a defense that's maybe at least average and not just bad? Because that's what we've seen the last few years. It's just been bad, and that's kept the Bengals from being what they were, at least more at the start of that Burrow era in 21 and 22.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.